40 years that he served his constituents in the House of Commons.
So do you think there should be further protection?
The protection should be there if a Member of Parliament feels that they require it, or that their staff should require it. But we've got to be very careful to balance that with keeping the so very important aspect, almost unique in our democracy, which is the openness and the accessibility of elected representatives to their constituents. We do absolutely need to do something about the tone of the debate in our politics. We have lost and are losing, and you see it in social media, and I see some of the abuse that some of my colleagues get. We are losing, I think, fast the ability to disagree agreeably, and if anything could change in the light of last week's tragic events, given how he went about his business, a man with very strong held views, some of which I disagreed with, but he would do it in a courteous, polite and amiable manner, and we need to get back to that in this country, not just between ourselves as politicians, but out in the country as a whole. And to answer the original question, if an MP, MSP or anybody in public service, because it's not just elected representatives, feels unsafe, then yes, of course, the protection should be available to them to allow them to carry out their business representing this country in whatever capacity they are doing that.
Yes, what can you do using legislation? Should capital punishment be brought back? Have you as a nation gone too soft?
Is that something you'd like to see?
Yes, I would. What would you feel like if your young daughter got killed or your elderly father got killed for just doing their job?
Okay, I'm going to come round the audience and then I'll come back to yes, the
Legislation.
It's not just for MPs, MSPs to get the extra protection. We need to do it for the whole of society. Because in this area, in the last 5 days, there's been 2 fatal stabbings. We need to clamp down more on the punishment for anyone caught carrying a knife, rather than just looking at it from an MP or an MSP's point of view.
Well, I mean, we were discussing simply because that was the question. That, I mean, one of those stones was a 14-year-old, particularly distressing. So, Kate, the question is, what, if any, further protection should politicians have? I mean, you're all talking about if they feel, if politicians feel concerned they should have protection, but what should they be? Is it having a police officer stationed in every constituency surgery, or what is it practically? What does it mean?
I mean, it's not that, is it? Because the bread and butter of my job is surgeries with constituents. It's meeting people face to face. Now, through COVID, that's been more difficult. I've had virtual surgeries, but you cannot escape. And I would never want to. It's the part of the job I love the most, being out in my very beautiful constituency, almost as beautiful as Glasgow, meeting people face to face. But I don't think there's any politician, I can't think of any, who haven't had to face threatening behaviour, who haven't been subject to intimidating threats. And the challenge for all of us is that the worst atrocities start somewhere. And they start with these intimidating threats. They start with anger-fueled, dehumanising language, so often on social media. And I guess for me, it starts with all of us, again, calling out that dehumanising language, because every politician does have family. You know, scrutinise, criticise, hold politicians accountable, do all of that. That's the lifeblood of our democracy. But don't dehumanise to the lengths that some might, that then results in those atrocities. And I do see good examples. I mean, this week, if I could use one short example, I met up with a Conservative councillor who posted on Facebook that she'd met with me, and there was a post there that was less than flattering about me. She called it out, she blocked the person, and she said she wouldn't tolerate it. Credit where it's due, that's the leader of Borders Council, and I was really impressed.
So, Heather, what, if any, further protections? Because, I mean, talking about changing culture is good and all very well, but that takes time.
That does take time.
What can be done in the short to medium term?
In the shorter time, I think that there will almost certainly have to be an approach by our members of Parliament and our members of Scottish Parliament that triages things in the same way that GP surgeries do, and that there will have to be some element of screening. But what I would say is, this was a tragedy. It was a tragedy for Sir David and for his family. It was a tragedy for the people of Southend. We don't want an equivalent tragedy, which is that we let terrorism win by standing between our elected members of Parliament and members of Scottish Parliament and the people that they represent. I am represented in Parliament by Christine Jardine. I am represented in the Scottish Parliament by Gordon MacDonald. I have never met either of them, but I would like to think that if I wanted to, I could. And the thought that that might not be possible, I think, is tremendously sad. We don't want to heap a tragedy on another tragedy.
Brian.
I think there's there's a thing happening at the moment which I think we do have to protect our representatives, because they are our representatives and we need to make sure that they are safe, first and foremost. But in this extraordinary man who I didn't know, Sir David Ames, I mean, what comes across about his life was this was a man who was very ecumenical in his beliefs. You know, he had great relationships with our Islamic brethren, for example. And this, to me, and clearly this man was targeted. He was targeted because of that very reason, because he actually was across the divide. And
I mean, we have no idea why he was killed.
But I just thought it was shocking. I mean, I saw this wonderful kind of, when a group of the Islamic brethren came along and we were talking about him and how much they respected this man and how wonderful this man was. And I just thought, now this is a good guy. This is one of the good guys.
Yep.
And they're killing one of the good guys. That's what scared me.
Right, we have got about 5 minutes left. I want to get one question in very quick, so you all have to be reasonably brief, if you would, which is from Ashley Hanny.
Glasgow's refuse services have been severely impacted by the pandemic. Our city is currently littered with rubbish and rats. With COP26 coming, which I welcome by the way, I just wonder, is this the right time to be showcasing our city?
What do you think?
I think that it could be embarrassing for the city.
Could be embarrassing?
Yep.
Anas?
Well, we have our cleansing workers going on strike during COP26 because of the state of our streets and the cuts to cleansing services. We have our rail workers going on strike because we're cutting routes here in Scotland at a time when we're trying to tell people to get out of cars and get into public transport. We had an announcement today that bus drivers in Glasgow are planning on going on strike during COP26, and this is a direct result of us saying one rhetoric on the international stage and the national stage and cutting local budgets for local people in our communities at the same time, which is completely and utterly unacceptable. Glasgow is the greatest place in the world. I love the city of Glasgow. I was born here, brought up here, proud to represent it. We call ourselves the Dear Green Place, but this Dear Green Place has been let down by cuts to local government, cuts to local budgets, and not supporting.
You have to be brief. I'm sorry. I'm just going to take you back to the original question, which is Glasgow's refuse service has been impacted by the pandemic. Our city is littered with rubbish and rats. Great having COP26 at Glasgow. Is this how Glasgow should be portrayed on the world stage? Kate, what would you say?
Well, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of work being done right now with people out on a daily basis, ensuring that the rubbish is collected, that the fly tipping is cleared, and that the graffiti is wiped off. Every single city is going to have to
just
clear.
as you said that, a whole raft of hands went up. Let me just say very quickly. I've got done as I've heard from you already, forgive me. Man in the white shirt, you have to be really quick.
One of the things that I always think the Scottish Government does is put a plaster over things. So it's funding put into this for about 3 weeks, and then when everyone leaves, when this international event is ended, we'll come back to there's litter everywhere.
Heather.
This is no.
Sorry, you've literally got about 30 seconds. I'll give 15 seconds.
I mean, Glasgow has a proud heritage of hosting international events and showcasing the best of Glaswegian hospitality and welcoming people. I think that's what we should be celebrating in the run-up to COP.
Pay the workers so they don't go on strike.
This is the most amazing city. This is the city where 300 years ago Adam Smith studied. It wasn't. There was no rubbish collection in those days, and it was still the best city in the world. The motto here that this city is let Glasgow flourish. I think Glasgow will flourish in COP26. Like you, I welcome it. I think it's going to be a great 2 weeks, rubbish or not.
Brian.
I think it's great that Glasgow is hosting COP26.
And what about the point that you're making there about the issues with rubbish collection, rats, fly tipping, what have you?
I mean, that's life.
Okay, that's life. Andrew.
Well, I disagree slightly. I think for the people who are living in Glasgow, it shouldn't be life. I think that Glasgow City Council pick their game up in time. We've seen Glasgow at its best. We saw in 2014 the amazing Glasgow that was demonstrated to the world through the Commonwealth Games and Aberdeen winning the League Cup. And that's what we know Glasgow can be. And I really hope that Glasgow City Council and the Scottish Government can step up and get it back to where it was then, because Glasgow deserves that, and we should be concentrating on what the negotiations are being. The negotiations are being held up behind closed doors, and not on the fact the litter's not being picked up or
I've got
is not
time to
being
one more
around
thing.
Glasgow.
One more thing for the audience. The woman there with the long hair at the back.
It's just for for an event meant to be about protecting the environment. Having the place covered in rubbish, it kind of gives mixed messages, which is kind of what makes that embarrassing.
Alrighty, I have to say our time is up. There's lots of hands shot up with this. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more time, but we're out of time. Thank you very much to the panel for coming this evening. Thank you to all of you for coming and being such an engaging audience here in Glasgow. And of course, thank you to you at home for watching from Glasgow and Question Time. Bye-bye.